Hi, welcome to Smart Path Conversations. I'm your host, Robert Gamble. I'm joined today by my co-founder, Jonathan Chiswick, and our guest, Natalie Burns. Natalie Burns is a homeschool educator and consultant with 14 years of experience. And today we are going to be talking about the homeschool mind shift, unlocking children's potential. So Natalie, I'll hand it over to you. Would love to hear a little bit more about you, and we'll get things kicked off here.
Oh, I'm so glad to be chatting with you about this today. For those of you that do not know me yet, hello, my name is Natalie Burns, certified teacher turned homeschooling mom now myself. And for those moms that find that winging it is starting to ruffle your feathers, especially as your children are getting older, homeschooling moms call me when they need an actual plan for homeschool teaching so that you can finally communicate, connect, and raise a critical thinker who loves learning.
Awesome. So Natalie, you started out as a certified teacher. Can you tell us a bit about what led you to get into the homeschooling world and then eventually begin, working with other parents as a coach?
My journey to homeschooling is a little bit different than many other teacher turn homeschooling moms in that I did not find that I wanted to leave the system. I really actually enjoyed teaching teenagers. I worked mostly with senior or grade 12 students in biology, and I also taught dance. And I loved seeing their light bulb moments. It was when my oldest daughter was starting to enter into the kindergarten age, and I realized, oh, I was going to miss her light bulb moments. And that draw to really experience that with my own children was what pulled me to decide, you know what, I think I'm going to step back from teaching. We're going to move out of the suburbs a little bit more. We'll start a little homestead. I'll do this little quiet life thing, and I'll homeschool my own three children. And then as everybody knows, life does not always go according to plan. And I ended up becoming a homeschool support teacher with the local homeschooling academy. And I was my own children's support teacher for a little while. And that's when I realized, oh, a lot of this support is actually still for children. And there's nothing out there for moms. And moms are left like high and dry, not really sure how to approach things, not sure how to connect with their children. They're finding that this dream of homeschooling is actually turning into a huge rub with their relationship, and it's better to have a good relationship with your children. So, how can they have the best of both worlds? And that's when Homeschool Teaching Simplified was born. And now I support moms with that actual teaching strategy so that this can be an enjoyable experience.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely out of the parents we've spoken with, what really resonates from what you just said is the idea of really getting to be there and be part of that learning journey with your kids. I think a lot of parents see this as an opportunity to really kind of get more time with their kids, sharing something that's really formative with them outside of the rest of parenting, for sure. Jonathan, I know that you have three homeschool daughters. Do you want to share a little bit about kind of like what that was like getting started with your family? What were some challenges that you maybe ran into?
Yeah, I mean, there's always everybody has different reasons for why they get into homeschooling, and sometimes you're kind of forced into it, sometimes you choose it. But I think that the questions that Natalie brought up, it's just kind of like if you ask parents, hey, do you want to spend more time with your kids and have a better relationship with them? Pretty much every parent's going to say, of course. Why would I not want to do that? And then you present, this homeschooling option is like, well, this is the way to do that. And so then there's all these questions of like, yeah, but how do I do this? Where do I go? That seems like a lot of work. Like, I'm just overwhelmed. Of course I want a better relationship with my kids. Of course I want to spend more time with them, but that just doesn't seem realistic. And, we kind of went through that too with it, certainly with the first time going through it, it's just a lot of time to research and talking to people and trying to, doing things, quote wrong, and then realizing, oh, we actually should have done this, or I didn't even know this co-op was 2 miles away from my house and this is really awesome. We should check it out. So, the fact that running into more people doing things like what you're doing and helping homeschool parents is great because, I think more parents need to know that those resources are available because it is, and part of why we built SmartPath was to help parents through this journey. But, at the end of it, a lot of people just want someone to talk to and someone to kind of help them through the questions that they don't know. You don't know what you don't know. And, having someone like you to help us through that early process certainly would have probably accelerated the learning as to what might work, what might not work, what ideas should we try.
I love how you just mentioned you don't know what you don't know. And that's what makes a really authentic and natural moment when you can just the discussion going, keep the ball rolling and steer them into the next learning aspect. But unless you have those tools to pull from your tool belt, you're going to be able to make that into a really natural moment where it doesn't feel like learning. And so equipping yourself with those underlying communication tools, teaching strategies, ways to bring about that higher level thinking, then it's going to feel rigid.
Yeah, it definitely seems many of the families that we've spoken with, and especially when we talk to parents who haven't made the jump into homeschooling, that kind of moment of dipping your toes in the water and then deciding, all right, can we actually do this or not? Can be pretty scary. And so it's really amazing that, there's coaches like you, and obviously we're trying to do it Smart Path to really kind of make it clear and show people, hey, it's actually not that bad. The water's warm, jump right in, right? So I'd like to hear a little bit more about how critical thinking became such a core part of your approach, and then what was the moment when you realized that that was the piece that so many families were missing?
Critical thinking started for me back when I was a teenager. So I was a regular old public school kid and often suppressed and stifled. And every time I ask questions, because I'm a little bit of a question asker, why or how do you know, or what about this and what about this perspective? Everyone said, shh, calm down, don't worry about it. Just write down the answer that they tell you to, and you'll pass and you'll be just fine. Let's just push you through the system, keep you safe in the realm with everybody else. But I didn't really want to be in the herd. I wanted to break free and do the impossible. I wanted to have that unlimited potential. And so I found from my own teenage years that I didn't get to rocket launch the way I wanted to. And instead, in my 30s, was trying to find what is my identity? Who am I? What do I really want to be doing? How can I do this? And I thought that was a little bit unfair for our next generation. So when I went into teaching, a big goal of mine already in the public high school was to help those students start to think for themselves a little bit more. So I never had, well, at the first years I did, and then I stopped doing multiple choice kinds of questions, and I would have just open-ended questions for different testing that I did, and I often did them verbally. I would just do hot seats. And I realized that that was actually really working to have students in like the lower level classes actually knowing. And I had classes where nobody was passing tests to everybody was passing tests. And
Amazing.
so when I looked at that with the homeschool, I thought not every teaching strategy can just go from the classroom to the homeschool. So I'm sure any former teachers listening know that many of those strategies do not cross over and work. So I tweaked things and brought in the best and brought that into a homeschool setting, and those open-ended questions, keeping those opportunities for more than one right answer, more than one way to get to an answer. How to tackle a question that has no right answer at all was the key here for developing thought processes in somebody else, and not telling somebody else what to think was absolutely key here. And this can be really hard for parents because when our children are babies, they need to be told exactly what to do, explicitly instructed A, then B, then C, then D, and they cannot get to D without that very formal approach. And so as you are teaching your child, say, how to tie their shoes very incrementally, but now you have a 10-year-old who wants to sort of figure things out, but still wants to be under your wing. And then you have a 15-year-old who does not want to have anything to do with you, but they need you. and
Yeah.
they're really navigating this slow transition to thinking for themselves. The best thing that we can do is not tell them what to think, and instead give them perspectives, give them ideas, show them why and how we've gotten to the conclusions that we did, and then say, this is why these other people think differently than I do, and you'll notice this out there. And so you get to decide for yourself where you fall along these different values that we hold. And that, me, is key because it starts to teach our children to take away judgment for other people. It keeps them open to the differences that they're going to encounter. And then when they see those differences, they don't think that they have to become like those other people. They know that it's okay, that they are different. And so that brings in this different lens and this different filter that they're bringing the information in. They can think about it critically. They can take that in without saying, I have to think like you because you said that.
Yeah, it really resonates creating this, almost high trust environment, right? I think, when we think about learning, it's kind of by definition the exposure to and exploration of things that we don't already know or understand, right? And that requires a certain degree of vulnerability, right? To go well, and in order to have vulnerability, you have to have trust. Really, that definitely really resonates with me. One kind of funny thought that came to mind when you were talking about your experience as a teenager in the school system. They definitely teach you about this method, but then there's a little bit of irony in that they don't like you using it when you go on to other subjects. So that made me crack up a little bit.
100%.
So jumping into the types of myths that you hear most about teaching critical thinking and homeschooling. So I would imagine parents probably have different sets of questions when they kind of come into this. What are some of the myths that are out there? What are some of the main questions that parents have coming into this? Specifically teaching critical thinking?
If I were to narrow it down to that one main false idol that a lot of parents turn to, I'd say it's that we need to control the information that our children are getting. And that to teach them discernment, we need to model discernment for them and control what media they get and don't get, really enforce those values, stick to pre-approved ideas. And unfortunately, I say this is a false idol because it does not actually build those discernment muscles. So as much as getting that pre-approved curriculum that perfectly matches in with your ideals, you can have that as long as you also have other exposure to ideas, because this is the safe time to do that. This is the time when they can learn about other ideas with a little bit of context for how to wrestle with that rub. If they don't get that now, they're going to seek it out later without the support and the supportive environment of what to do with this seemingly contradictory information. And so I would say don't necessarily want to preload our children with all of the ideas and answers. We want to give them the practice of questioning to get to those ideas and answers and have those light bulb moments for themselves. Because as we know, we can tell people what to think, but until they think about it for themselves and they think it's their idea, that's when it clicks in.
Totally. Yeah. And it's one of the things that comes up a lot talking to parents is desire to prepare their kids for adulthood, right? That's one of the main drivers that many of the parents we speak with bring up as, why do you get into homeschooling? What really resonates from that is you need to be able to filter information, and you're not going to have a super kind of curated environment that you're in at all times, right? And you need to be able to kind of navigate that, or whether you agree or disagree with something, whether you think it's true or not. And I think kind of getting back to the previous bit you shared about your experience as a teacher, getting away from multiple choice questions and getting into kind of critical thinking and more open response. There's no multiple choice questions in the real world, right? When I'm sure you experience this as a business owner, Jonathan and I definitely experienced this. You're not just given, A, B through D every time you have a question about where to go with your taxes, or with personnel or coaching people, whatever it might be. And so I think that's a really powerful thing to get away from this idea of codified outcomes and just really give them the tools to actually go through, evaluate, make their own decisions, and then shape their thinking.
Yeah, an example that comes to mind a little bit about that is how in our home we've really been on a journey for getting away from judgment and looking at non-judgmental listening. And one of the things that I do with my children in order to bring that about in a slow, gradual process is I stopped asking them why questions in the context of why did you XYZ. And then we definitely work on not having others ask each other, did you go on my bed when I told you not to? That kind of question. Because two reasons. One, when you ask somebody a judgmental why question, it's an automatic defensive kind of posture that you're going to take on. And also, if I don't know about everybody else, but my children are very good at reasoning their way through things. And if you can figure out a pretty good reason why you did something, maybe it's okay. And so I want to be careful that I'm not helping my children think up reasons for why they could do something that would still be a harmful decision. So we want to look at helpful and harmful decisions and not like why they can kind of get around that. And that's big in our home. However, it's not big everywhere. So we talk about, okay, well, in our home, however, these are the strategies that you can use when you come up against these why questions outside of the home. And my 8-year-old, which really just on the edge of critical thinking around age 8 or 9, he was in gymnastics this past spring. And his coach said, "Why are you crossing your legs like that at the bar?" as he was trying to flip around. And I'm watching this like, well, it's because he's just trying to throw his body over and his feet are crossing. He doesn't have a reason why. And I watched to see how he'd respond inside. And he just kind of looked at her, shrugged, and then worked on not crossing his feet. And then later she comes up again and says, "Why are you still crossing your feet? Uncross your feet." And he goes, "Okay." And he did it. And I was so impressed. And I said to him later, because his gymnastics coach was like a 20-something, didn't really understand all of the nuances for how to really ask it in a little bit less judgmental way. And I said, she was asking this in a super judgmental way. And I really appreciate that you didn't get upset with her, number one, and you didn't get upset with yourself and take that on internally. He already had a proper idea of how to view himself. And he didn't think he wasn't good enough. He didn't think he was doing a bad job. He didn't think he didn't like her anymore, which often our children will tend to go into those categories when they hear terrible criticism about something that they're doing. He didn't think those. He just went like almost like a rain jacket, and the rain hits it and dribbles down. Is went, "Oh, well, you have communicated it to me in this way, and I hear what you're saying, and I'm just going to work on it." And he did not take it personally. And I realized, wow, I'm so proud of you that you did not take that personally. Thank you so much for being so gracious with her, I said to him. And I realized that this in real life is very, very important so that they can have healthy relationships with anybody that they come in contact with. And we can start developing this pretty early on, around age 8 or 9.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much context that other people are bringing to every interaction, every conversation. Maybe they have learned habits, maybe they have unlearned habits, maybe they're having a really good day, a really bad day, and we don't have that context typically. And so that's a really great example of how you just kind of come in and give people a little bit of grace, and then take it with a grain of salt and say, yeah, you know what, it's fine. Like, I'm not going to judge. We'll just keep going and learn what we can from each other. So,
it's such a journey though, because how often do we say, "Oh, it's fine," and then on the inside we're stirring up and bubbling over like a pot of boiling water because we don't know how to process it on the inside. And so when we can give our children these thinking processes for how to go about the way that their brains actually take in information, work with it, and then make a result out of it, that is the key. So that in relationships, in learning, when they're challenged with, "I don't know how to do this concept of multiplying polynomials," they don't get stuck. They actually can exercise resiliency now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good to like give the toolkit to not put up barriers, right? When you start to be confronted with something that's maybe challenging or negative feedback, whatever it might be, staying open and just not shutting down. It's a really, really good skill to have. Jonathan, any examples from your homeschooling or work experience to supplement there?
No examples. Just curious some tactics for how to implement it for sure. Because it sounds like something that I see parents be like, "Oh, well, I'd like to implement that course in my curriculum," but it sounds like it's more of like a life skill that is taught that covers everything that it's kind of like parenting, not just homeschooling, but it's also very relevant to entire schooling, and even maybe for kids who aren't being homeschooled, in the public school. This is a pretty valuable skill set that they should have. So this might even be something that parents would want to try to learn how to implement regardless of the educational situation that they have their kids in.
Yeah, and a lot of the moms that I work with say, "Oh, this really helps me in all my relationships." So it's really for all of us to talk about a couple of practical examples. I mean, we touched upon open-ended questions. So if you're listening and wondering, wait, what was that open-ended question thing? A closed question has a direct answer. So a yes or no answer, a one word answer versus an open question has more than one way that your child can answer that question. Not so open that it leaves them hanging and they don't know where to tackle it from, just open enough that it provides options and it gives them the opportunity to take it whatever depth that they are comfortable with at the time. So a question like, what did you find surprising at co-op today? That would be an open-ended question rather than what was your favorite part and then a direct sentence answer. So we have openness in our questioning can be very helpful for allowing them to make space. And inside of the Teaching Inspired community, we talk a lot about different other communication strategies. So what if you ask that open-ended question and they still find a way to answer it really closed off? Other techniques to draw out a little bit more and get them really comfortable with the ball being in their court, and just keep putting the ball back in their court. Every time they try to give it to you, keep putting it back in their court. And then the other topic that is super popular inside of Teaching Inspired is the aspect of resiliency. So one of the easiest, simplest ways that you can do this is walking your child through a story. Either you tell them a story if they're younger, have them write a story about it if they're older, or walk through an example together of a story where somebody goes through highs and lows, and you just keep going through highs and lows. Something really happy happens, something really devastating happens, something surprising happens, something tragic happens, and then we just keep moving through. That will, pausing as you need to really check in with, hey, how do you feel about that happening in the story right now? What do you respond to with this, and helping your child identify how they're feeling when this happens, and if they're getting tense or if they're loosening up, if they're getting upset, if they're sweating, if they feel their heart racing when something's surprising, and helping them move from that one emotion to the next, to the next, to the next, to help us learn not to get stuck in something. And one of actually the students inside of Teaching Inspired described resiliency as bounce back ability. So if you see these balls or pool noodles in the water that you push down, as soon as you let go, they pop right back up. And that's the bounce back ability that we want to create by moving our children up and down through the different emotions, so that when they get stuck and challenged, they don't stay in a pit. They know how to bring themselves back out of that pit.
Absolutely. And in terms of, so you mentioned co-ops. So how do you go about kind of identifying a co-op that is going to be in a similar vein of thinking, like that is working on the same skills? Like, what does that look like? I mean, what's your evaluation process, I guess? Kind of an open question, but
Yeah,
curious,
I'll
curious to-
clarify that the Teaching Inspired community is not actually co-op. It's a community for moms where I give them different teaching strategies that then they can implement with their children. So it has all sorts of activities and trainings and coaching calls and things like that. However, there are lots of times we talk about co-ops in there, and I've run my own little makeshift co-op before. And with co-ops, it's a beautiful way to bring children together and to practice a lot of these aspects that you're doing with them already one-on-one. I mean, one of the things, my children right now are at a theater camp with their homeschooling friends, and all of us moms are coming together and creating this 1 week experience for them to put on a performance for a play that the children wrote with their mom. The children wrote the songs. They're all singing it. They're acting. They all organize their costumes. They're rehearsing over and over, and we're actually putting on a show to many, many people. And it's a beautiful way for them to see how other people do things differently than them. And that's okay. It's a way for them to get that pushback naturally, like that sort of social pressure of what ways culturally we do like to behave, which is kind of like socialization. And so we get those aspects. We have a range of children that are babies running around up to, I think the oldest in our co-op is maybe 15. And so we get that age range of lots of different types of people to interact with. So, when it comes to a co op, it can be super formal where you send your kids to a 1 day a week class. It could be something in the middle where moms are trading their best skills, or it could be something informal like we want to do this novel study together. Let's find amazing type of curriculum that has activities for it, and then we can do get together once a week and do this novel together. And so I love the co-op aspect and the ways that we can support one another a little bit better that way. And I think I answered your question about co-ops
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'd imagine it's definitely quite an experience for kids, right? To have this skill set. I mean, I wish I had this skill set when I was growing up, from what it sounds like, to be able to go and have interactions with their peers, and then be able to kind of when there's maybe a little bit of waviness in there, or rough seas, not necessarily get bogged down in that, and really just kind of be like, all right, maybe that was a negative interaction, maybe it was a good interaction, but I'm just kind of here floating, and you
Yeah.
know.
There's a lot of vulnerability when we
Mhm.
work with other people. And in the school system, it might look like pass your paper to the person next to you and mark each other's papers. And as much as we want to say we get away from that, even having a theater group together, somebody is delivering a line all by themselves and everybody else is listening in to see how they do. And so we are all going to experience those moments where we feel spotlighted. And so, yeah, helping our children navigate that with encouragement, with inspiration, with the focus on progress instead of perfection, and that personal growth journey helps them see that this is a good thing, because the this is why anxiety, I believe, happens a lot with teenagers. They realize one day, oh, I'm never going to hit that finish line, because the further I grow and get better, the further that success goalpost moves on ahead too, and I'm never going to reach it. And so I'm just going to keep progressing and keep going forever, and that can be actually quite discouraging. And so when we can reframe this mindset, not you're not there yet, you still have so far to go, instead look how far you've come, and let that internally drive your motivation to keep going further no matter how many roadblocks we hit.
It's funny because Jonathan and I talk about this a lot with young professionals and people starting out in their careers too. And one thing that people may kind of fixate on is getting to that title, or getting to that one pay range, or whatever it might be. And for anybody who's gone through their career, that's not the most satisfying thing, right? It's more about being in love with developing yourself, being proud of the things that you're able to accomplish, and the areas that you're able to improve on, finding the weaknesses that you're able to develop further into strengths eventually. There's definitely a lot of carryover there, I think, in terms of getting kids the tools to then succeed in their early career, and then be happy and self actualized around what they're accomplishing, and not just worrying about the next title.
Yeah, I think, and not being afraid to fail either, especially,
Totally.
that you always feel like there's a lot of risk to failing, but the reality is there's a lot less risk when you're 15 than when you're 45. So, take a lot more risks when you're younger, take advantage of it. And, I see this in, my kids, see this in a lot of kids in general. It's just the way the current systems are structured. There seems to be such a negativity around failure that you avoid it. So you avoid anything that could potentially have a risk of failure, and through that you just don't learn. And this is a great opportunity when you're young, in your preteen, teen years, to try all this stuff, and be okay with failing. But if you're worried about, well, I don't want to take this sort of class because I'll get a D and then I won't be able to get into the college that I think I want to go to, like, you just won't take the class, and so you won't learn. Or you won't try to start the business, or whatever it is. I think there's a lot more risk to not taking those risks, but the structure of the current system doesn't really enable that.
Yeah, that's a great clue for us as parents. When our children are avoiding something, there's likely a fear in the background here. And so to explore if that's a fear of failure and walking our children through that, doing that now while they're at home allows them to pursue any career path that they have in mind for their future.
Yep.
Absolutely. It's almost like thinking of how do you create enough trust to then um, inspire curiosity, right? So I know that one of the topics that you like to talk about is getting away from kind of robotic learning and then transitioning that into curiosity. Can you tell us a little bit more about your approach for that? And yeah, I'd love to hear a bit more.
Yeah, so I love working with older children. I used to teach high school, so teenagers are near and dear to my heart. And what I've noticed with little children is that that fun and that wonder and that curiosity, it's like it's a very natural sort of playfulness that we tend to lose into the teenagers for a variety of reasons. However, we can still tap into their natural curiosity and wonder. It just looks a little bit differently. So the door in for teenagers tends to be more around relevance. And when we can really tap into why something is meaningful for them and why it's relevant to their actual life, then they will increase their engagement and they'll be on board with you a lot more, finish things that they start because they have internal motivation due to just seeing what the point is. So as your children get older, if you really want to keep that razzle-dazzled curiosity alive, then hitting points that are relevant to them are going to be a really powerful button to push to get that going.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's also one of the benefits of flexible education experience, whether it's homeschooling or co-op, whatever you do, because you can go deep in areas where you see your kids might have an interest. I think it's one thing. I'll take one of my daughters. She's actually going to college this fall for marine biology research program. And she loves biology. But if I hadn't been able to have the flexibility to take her to South Florida and go on diving trips and do these fish research studies and other things outside of just reading the books about biology, I don't know that she would have the excitement and interest in that subject, even though it's like she is interested in it. It's one thing to say, well, this would enable you to be a marine biologist someday. Like, why wait till someday? Like, you can bring some of those experiences in today, and then you can figure out, like, oh, wow, I do actually really like this. So now I'm okay with all this book learning because I see the point to it.
Exactly.
I'm curious to hear as a parent. So you have kids. You coach other moms. You coach other parents. Do you notice any difference in your relationship with your kids now that you've introduced critical thinking as kind of a core concept for them?
Yeah, well, we have a neighbor of ours started homeschooling in September this past year, and they made it to about winter with one child and spring break with the other. And the reason why they just could not continue homeschooling was because of that relational rub. And that connection piece was just being worn down day by day and slowly eroded through the fight of trying to make their child do what they wanted them to do. And so when you can approach this with teaching strategy that really makes it about connection and about helping your child come to those pieces of information for themselves, that takes away this should aspects. It takes away the make it happen aspect, and it gives us a lot more openness. So the process that we call this typically is gradual release or a scaffolding process, where we demonstrate whatever we want them to know. We have them help us do it, and then we help them do it. And then now they get to do it all by themselves, and we give a little bit of feedback. And now they're ready to go on and spread their wings and fly. We don't push them out of the nest and say, go make this happen. We walk them through it. So we go back to multiplying polynomials. That can be a little bit intimidating. Maybe we need to actually read through the textbook the night before and just quickly refresh ourselves. What is a polynomial? And how are we going to do this? And then we can help them walk through. And even if you don't have time to do that, say, okay, well, which page of your book is this in? Let's look at this together and walk through it together and do it this way. And then for unschoolers, it doesn't need to include a book at all. And for anybody in the gray scale in between, it can look like, hey, this is a cake. You like eating cake? Let's make one together. I've demonstrated for you before. Now I'm going to have you help me do this, and I'm just going to talk you through it, and you're going to do it by yourself. And then talking them through, why do we have the butter at this temperature, or why is the egg going at room temperature first, or things like that, or why does it go wet to dry or dry to wet ingredients. And that is the process that allows them to feel like they are in the driver's seat of their own life and their own learning. It allows them to take responsibility for themselves, which we all of a sudden want to happen, but we just didn't actually do the process for often. So if you're finding that you want your child to have responsibility, you want them to take initiative for their learning, to wake up, do their things, get it done, and then check in with you. Yep, got it done. Then this is the process that you want to follow. You want to follow this gradual release process, giving them that white space so that they can rise up, and then using these communication strategies to keep putting the ball back in their court so that they're still supported, but they're thinking for themselves.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it's building a great foundation for them to feel that sense of ownership and say, you know what, I can do this. I have the tools. I have the support system I need. I can figure it out. I'm comfortable being challenged and figuring it out myself. It's a really powerful set of skills to give kids, especially as they get older.
Yeah,
well, I want to go ahead, Jonathan.
No, I was just agreeing with you.
Awesome. Good thing we're co-founders. We agree on a lot of things. So Natalie, I want to say thank you for joining us on Smart Path Conversations. I really enjoyed hearing everything about you and your background, and I feel like I learned a lot today. Jonathan, I'm sure you learned a lot too. So thank you both for joining. If you want to hear more from Natalie, you can find her on homeschoolteachingsimplified.com. So for everybody listening, thank you again. This is Smart Path Conversations, and have an awesome day.
Yes, and thank you for having me.